A seat at the table.
Hi, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of A Seat at the Table. I'm so excited. I'm your host, Tealine Matilda. And yes, we're going to be having a conversation today. But before we get into the conversation, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe so that I can continue to push out more content for you guys and you guys can stay connected with this community. So, yes. So, what am I going to be talking about today? As you could probably see in the title, it's going to be about comparison. And I feel like this is something that we all struggle with. I struggle with. And I feel like it was just important for me to talk about that. And also, as you guys can see, I'm going solo dolo today. I'm so excited. But I really wanted to talk to you guys about comparison because I truly believe that comparison really does steal our joy. So how I came about like knowing for sure that I was going to make one of my first solo episodes about comparison was a conversation that I had with my friend a couple days ago. So he was basically was trying to ask for my advice and he was like, listen, like I'm good friends. One of my good friends is really succeeding in this area and I'm not jealous of him, but sometimes it does bring about certain insecurities within myself. And he basically asked me like, am I a bad person for comparing myself to him? And I assured him that number one, he wasn't a bad person, but I was honest with him and I told him the fact that you keep comparing yourself to your friend means that you are more invested into your friend's life than your own. And he was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it like that. And I was like, and I feel like that's not a way that we usually think of it. We never think of it as, our attention from a perspective of where's our attention going. So that's kind of like why and where I'm coming from on this episode. Just talking about comparison, where it stems from, how we can fight comparison to make sure that we secure the joy that God has already given us. So, of course, I went to ChatGPT because I wanted to really unpack this. I can't see. Okay, I wanted to unpack this. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, what is comparison? ChatGPT says, comparison is the act of evaluating two or more things side by side to notice similarities, differences, and relative value. It is a mental process of measuring. So when I heard that definition, because I wanted the most basic definition without any form of just a basic definition of comparison. And when I heard that definition, I realized that comparison in and of itself is not inherently bad. Like comparing something is like just saying this is one thing, this is another thing. How do they measure up against one another? You can compare things, you can compare people, you can compare situations. And so comparison in essence is not inherently bad. But what I believe makes comparison toxic is when there is not a fair measuring stick. And this is where we kind of go wrong, and this is where the comparison trap kind of comes in, because we're not taking into account other factors that make us comparing our lane to someone else's lane unfair. So I went back to ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT, what are some factors we do not consider when we are comparing ourselves? Because I really wanted to just see what ChatGPT would say, right? So Chat says, number one, different starting lines. So that would include background, resources, and opportunities, hidden struggles. These are things that we deal with privately, seasons and timing, support system, how many people you have in your corner or lack thereof, calling an assignment, what we're actually called to and what we're meant to do, pace of growth, and this includes mental, physical, and spiritual growth, as well as sacrifice and cost, what we're actually willing to lay down to achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve. And so as you can see, everything that I listed is relative, and everything that I've listed is sometimes out of our control. We can't control how many people support us. We can't always control what background we came from. We can't always control, we can control how much we lay down, but sometimes we can't even control how much we're given. And so it's so important to realize that when you are comparing yourself to someone else, there are certain factors that you're not taking into account. You don't know where that person started off. You don't know how far that person has come. You don't know if you're willing to even do the things that that person did to get that specific result. And so that's where this is the comparison trap. That's where it comes in. And I just wanted to highlight that, because tying that back into the conversation that I had with my friend, he's sitting there comparing his successes, his friend's successes, probably to his losses, failing to realize how far he himself has come as an individual. And so that's why I feel like we need to compare. We shouldn't compare ourselves at all, period, because we're all different people and we all come from different backgrounds and we all have different stories. So I want to get into like, how do we overcome this? But before I talk about how we can overcome this is my definition of comparison. I said comparison begins when we measure ourselves to that of another's, without factoring in God's plan or life circumstances. And the reason why I wanted to highlight that is because a lot of times when we're comparing ourselves, we're not thinking about what God actually has for us. We're looking at someone else and we're not thinking, God, what they have, is that actually something that you have for me? Or do you actually have that for me in this season? Maybe you have it for me in the next season. Maybe I'm not meant to have access to that thing at all because it's not going to serve my purpose or my assignment, or will hurt me, or I'm not the type of person to have that specific result. So when the problem with comparing ourselves is we're not even factoring in what God wants. And part of following Christ and just living for God is being able to think about the will of God and to think about what is it that God actually wants for me. Then the second part of that definition is also us not factoring in life circumstances. Us not factoring in the little things that actually add up to the big things. Some of our traumas that actually did have an impact on us that we're not even considering. We thought we got over it, but it's still there. The doubts, the fears, the anxieties, the people that have something to say. So all of these things play a role in our overall experience and our overall journey. And when we don't take these things into consideration, we do ourselves a disservice. So how do we not fall into this comparison trap? I kind of broke down what it is, why we shouldn't compare ourselves, but then you're like, okay, I know this already. How do I now live a life where I'm not comparing myself? The first that came to my mind is Hebrews 12:2, and it says that we should look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. I love that verse because it highlights how we should make Christ our measuring stick. And again, I know it is hard. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's easy, but it is the only way to actually run your race and live in your truth without the outside pressures of what everyone else is doing. You have to focus on Christ. You have to make Christ your ultimate measuring stick. You have to trust what God is doing in your own life, irrespective of what God is doing in the next person's life. And when you shift your focus, when you shift your gaze on God's will, on Christ, on what He wants for you, there's limited room for you to now put it on someone else, right? So back to that original conversation that I had with my friend, talking about how he was more invested into what his friend was doing. That's your attention, right? So your attention, where you put your attention into, is what you're basically investing in. So if you're always looking at the next person, oh, this person blew this way, this person got this person got that, what room are you going to have to actually be grateful for what God has done in you and actually make room for God, what God is trying to do in your life? You get what I'm saying? So it is about where you focus, where your attention goes to, what you're invested in. When you're constantly looking at the next person, when you're constantly looking at what he's doing, what she's doing, you're not going to be able to truly see what God is doing. And I know it is difficult because we're in an age of social media. Even if you're on the timeline, I already know what you got going on in your life, unprovoked. But you have to try to make it a practice to be more invested in your life than that of others. So part of me being more invested in my life is this podcast, because I'm gonna be real, I don't really even got time like that to be looking at anyone else, because I'm constantly working on this podcast. Like, you need to be invested in your own life. And I told him, I said, you need to be promoting yourself the most. You need to be praying for yourself the most. You should be there should be nobody that is more invested in you than you. Point blank, period. If nobody's reposting your stuff, you need to be reposting your stuff. If nobody praying for you, you need to be, everything that has to do with you, you need to be doing the most. You need to be doing the most of. So I told him that, and he definitely took that and received that. And I think that's something that we can all apply in our own life, to be more invested, to shift our attention into what God is doing in our lives. So that is how we reshift our focus, and that is the practical way of how this all plays out, right? So some tangible ways would be being your own biggest cheerleader, investing in yourself, limiting social media exposure, praying about your insecurities, and of course practicing gratitude, and also embracing your own pace. So you can just take a note of that. And then to anyone that is struggling with comparison, right? Because I'm not just going to come here and say this is the 10 steps to overcome comparison, because life is not like that. You know, you're going to set a goal for yourself, and you're going to find that sometimes it just happens. Always recenter yourself when you do. Give yourself grace, show yourself grace, and just continue to go on that journey. When it does happen, you know, just kind of recenter, don't beat yourself up. Just kind of take a step back and recognize when you are comparing yourself, because sometimes we can do it unintentionally. Sometimes we just, you know, it's almost subconscious at times. But when you do find yourself in that position, just make sure that you regroup and just recenter yourself and pray about it and focus back on Christ. So that's what I would give practically. And to anyone that is struggling with comparison, you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to beat yourself up. Like, it's something, as I said, we all go through and we all do it. But just continue to invest in yourself and just go on that journey of self-discovery, so that you'll be more attentive to what God is doing in your life. So the journal prompt that I have for you guys is, what is your attention or your investment going into in this season? It could be anything. It could be education. It could be anything, leadership role. Like, what are you putting your attention in your own life? So just be specific and just write that out and pray about it, and then continue to lean into that in this season of your life. I love you guys so much. Thank you for watching this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.